Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to wherever you might be joining us from. My name is Marcin Jerzewski, and I am an analyst at the Taipei office of the European Values Center for Security Policy. And it is my great honor and pleasure to welcome all of you to tonight's webinar, focusing on the 16/17+1 format, threats and opportunities for the Republic of Poland and the Czech Republic. Since 2012, China has engaged 16 and later 17 and now again 16 Central and Eastern European countries, including European Union member states and Western Balkan countries, under the China Central Eastern Europe cooperation format, which it has portrayed as an innovative approach to regional cooperation. Even though it has been framed as a multilateral framework, in practice, this format has largely remained bilateral and highly competitive in nature. While in 2012, Central and Eastern European countries had enthusiastically embraced this form of cooperation as a chance to diversify their EU-focused economic relations, at this point, many of them started to voice dissatisfaction with the poor economic results this cooperation has yielded so far. And arguably, the 2021 departure of Lithuania from the cooperation framework has marked an important milestone for the framework and has been a clear indication that Central and Eastern European countries are trying to recalibrate their relationships with Beijing. We have also seen that countries participating in this format have also begun to send lower levels of representation to annual summits, and some of the heads of governments of countries still participating in the format, including Estonia's Prime Minister Kaja Kallas, have called on the European Union member states to exclusively engage with Beijing in a 27+1 format, speaking with China with a unified voice. Today, we will explore the ramifications of participation in the 16+1 format from the perspective of Poland and Czechia as a part of the Polish-Czech Forum. So without further ado, please allow me to introduce two experts who will speak on this topic with us tonight. Firstly, Wojciech Adamczyk, who will be speaking about the case of Poland. Wojciech Adamczyk is a graduate of the Master of Science in China and Globalization at King's College London, University of London, as well as the School of Law and Economy of China at the University of Warsaw. He is also a graduate of Corporate Finance and Accounting at the Warsaw School of Economics and the Academy of Young Diplomats at the European Academy of Diplomacy. Wojciech, thank you for joining us tonight.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
And our second speaker, talking about the Czech perspective on the 16+1 framework, is my European Values Center colleague, David Plaszek. David is an analyst for the Red Watch program of the European Values Center, where he is involved in topics and projects regarding East Asia. He started cooperating with EVC in the summer of 2021 and previously worked in academia as a university lecturer. David studied and researched international relations and European studies at universities in Belgium, Germany, and South Korea. Among his past working experiences, he has focused on analytical processes and projects for international companies, as well as state institutions. David, welcome.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me.
Gentlemen, before we jump into the discussion about the 16+1 framework on its own terms, can you briefly comment on the current state of bilateral relations between China and Poland and Czechia, respectively?
Well, thanks for the question. In general, taking a regional overview first, it is clear that amid the war in Ukraine, the CEE countries are rather showing a strong support for Ukraine, while on the other hand, even if so far not directly, China itself supports Russia, so as the result, it makes the 16+1 relationship pretty strained at the current moment. Of course, excluding Hungary and some of non-EU countries from the formula, we might say that at the current stage, I see no vivid chances to boost the status of relations within the format. And what's rather important, like in a macro aspect, is the issue of the EU-China investment agreement, that was signed in 2020. Right now, observing and trying to analyze what it brought to the overall relationship between the Europe and the China, we may wonder if it hasn't been dead already. Like especially after China's refusal to condemn Russia for invasion of Ukraine. It's like, to be specific about Poland and Czechia, it seems that the latter country has more problematic stages of the bilateral relationship with China, as it's worth to underline that the new Czech government is expected to take rather a tough stance, a hard line on what the Czech government considers as hostile behavior of Chinese government in terms of human rights in Xinjiang province or Taiwan, or like the U.S.-China trade war itself. And like for Czechia, I might say that there is a chance, like a possibility of excluding 5G, like Chinese companies introducing the framework of like the architecture of the 5G can be rather excluded. But on the other hand, like from the um, Polish side adheres to the stance of the US. There are, of course, a few reasons for that, but mostly, typically speaking about the US and China trade war. And right now, the war in Ukraine, it all creates the picture that Polish government, as well as Czech, are becoming more critical of China's hawkish policies. Thanks.
For providing this regional view. David, do you have anything to add on the current state of relations between Czechia and China?
Yes. So I would start this little contribution by quoting a headline of an article from an official Chinese newspaper that was on the topic of Czech and Chinese relations. And the article headline read, the sky over the Czech and Chinese relations is volatile, and the pro-Chinese president is at the moment in a critical condition, which can sound very strange, but actually it captures very nicely what is happening in the last few months and up to the last year, because the Chinese and Czech relations really went through a series of watershedding events and changed, I would even say, changed profoundly since the summer of 2020. There are three main events that affected these mutual relations. It's the last election, the general elections that took place last autumn, that completely redrew the government and the political scene in the Czech Republic. And also it's the COVID pandemics that also impacted the general opinion on China in this country. And last but not least, the third thing is a general feeling of disappointment when it comes to Chinese investments. We're going to talk about it later, so I'm just going to say it in a short way now. So to sum up the last decade, after 2012, the relations and business cooperation between China and Czech Republic was increasing continually. And it also was related to the fact that the government, and especially the president of the Czech Republic, were very supportive of so-called economic diplomacy, of trying to progress our relations with China, to sacrifice part of our agenda, especially when it comes to human rights and democratic rules, for the sake of having the possibility of obtaining more investments from China. So this was happening, let's say, from 2012 till 2019, right? This period of really of warming relations, of increasing cooperation. But then these three events arrived: first COVID, pandemics, that actually impacted China very negatively in the eyes of many in the country. Then the disappointment, the thing that these promises never fulfilled, and even media that can be actually considered to be pro-government or even pro-Chinese to some extent, were actually changed their narrative because it is too obvious to ignore that the investments really didn't come. And the last straw, I would say, that broke the camel back was simply the change of the government last autumn, when the previous government coalition that was clearly trying to get as much investments from China as possible was actually they actually lost the election, and the new government is now clearly much more anti-Chinese, in the sense that during the whole time when they were opposition, they were very loud about being critical toward China, towards our cooperation with China, as well as with Russia, of course. So when the former opposition politicians came to government, they actually fulfilled the expectations, and they are behaving still the same way, meaning there is not much support for any more cooperation with China, and the relation actually lost its speed, lost the momentum, and right now the relations are rather decreasing. But we will talk about the details later. So that's so far from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for elaborating on the current dynamics in the relations between China and Poland and Czechia. I think that we can see that in those two cases, there is clearly a change that we are witnessing in the approaches of the respective governments to Beijing. However, it appears that Poland has taken a somewhat more enthusiastic approach to engaging with the framework than some of its regional neighbors, including Czechia and Lithuania. For example, Poland hosted the inaugural 16+1 summit and continued to send the head of state to the summits, even when its regional neighbors decided not to do so. So, Wojciech, in your opinion, what factors can explain these divergent dynamics?
Well, thanks for the question. Here, I should definitely start with the Polish perspective on the 16+1 formula. Like Poland's rising status in the EU and its regional economic leader's position naturally makes this country the most attractive actor in the framework. Like geographically speaking, the geographical location of Poland has been the most advantageous among all of the 16+1 member states, and this kind of very prosperous transportation logistics industries could potentially make it like a production distribution center for from the countries on the so-called Belt and Road Initiative. This creates a huge opportunity for Poland, and in purely geographical terms, I would say Poland is a natural gateway to the European Union, and it complies with the New Euro-Asian Land Bridge Economic Corridor. In this situation, like factors that potentially favor the creation of a Silk Road economic belt, like the hub in Poland, include among many different factors, like the key factors, multilateral character of the corridor, like north, south, east, west, the already activated terminals serving as reloading stations, both at the eastern and the western borders of the Poland, of the country, as well as the intensified trade exchange, like with more with the focus on the export, not only the importing side in the bilateral trade exchange, but also in the terms of export for Poland. And as you can see, like some actions are already taken. And at the end, I believe so that Poland is likely to adopt the role of a regional hub in Central and Eastern Europe, though to some extent limited to the southern regions of the sea, like excluding Scandinavia, for instance. And the answer to the question is like about the divergent dynamics. Like, it's probably that back in 2012, when Warsaw hosted the inaugurational summit of 16+1 format, China had sent a message, like a clear, critical message that Poland would be a regional leader of format, and it would have to gain the most out of the cooperation. And the Polish perception of cooperation with China, mm, because of that, may worry, like, from each other. That's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving us a more close-up view of Poland's motivations and aspirations related to participation in the 16+1 framework. So, David, allow me to turn to you. In 2015, Czechia became the host of the New Silk Road Institute, which has been regarded as an important step in the institutionalization of the 16+1 format. Can you comment on the rationale behind the establishment of NSRIP and its relevance for Czechia-China relations?
All right. This is kind of specific Czech thing that is, of course, a reactions or part of these increasing relations after the 16+1 introduction, after the introduction of the platform or of 16+1. But it's important to say that to some extent, the New Silk Road Institute or NSRIP is in fact a lobbying initiative by Czech politicians and businessmen. It's basically a lobbying entity that is taking advantage or that is riding the wave of new possibilities that 16+1 introduced. And its overall impact is, as I will now explain, is rather small, despite its rather important sounding name. It is basically it is one of the institutions that were trying, of course, to increase the business or trade cooperation between the Czech Republic and China, and it was actually one of the examples of very narrow intertwining or very narrow connection between political and business interests within the Czech and Chinese relations, which is very typical for the Czech Republic. When we can see that the whole period when the mutual relations and business was increasing and was popular, basically this was based on only few important people decision and personal effort, especially of our president and his close circle, when these people, through their personal and political connections, were basically able to shape and to direct the whole Czech policy towards China and towards more cooperation with China. And actually, the institute is a part of it because it's a lobbying entity, and it's an example of this intertwining interests of political and business elites in the Czech Republic rather than anything else. Because, for example, the director of it is a former Minister of Foreign Affairs, which is from the same party. He's a social democrat, just like the president itself originally. And in the board of this institute, there are other actually former prime ministers, even for political parties. So it was an institution which was actually separated from the Chinese structure, but was trying to promote, to lobby for more cooperation, more investments from China in the hope of the coming 16+1 16+1 opportunities. It is very important to say that it lasted only 4 years. It was already actually closed, and the former director of the institute said that the reason for closing was the overall lack of interest from the Czech business or entrepreneurship community, and also the deteriorating or decreasing atmosphere when it comes to relations between China and the Czech Republic since 2018. So it existed only to 2019 and didn't really have big impact. What is important about it is it clearly shows how very specific are the relations and situation in each republic, when there is this mostly from the government party that is trying to push more investments and promising good economic they do not appear, and part of this efforts or projects actually they end without real results. So that would be all about the institute.
Thank you very much for elaborating more on the activities of the Institute. I believe that whenever we talk about multilateral frameworks, it is important to evaluate the degree to which they have been successfully institutionalized, and perhaps the hiccups in the works of NSRIP that David highlighted are an important part of our puzzle that we are trying to solve today about the shortcomings of the overall 16+1 framework. So building up on those different dynamics that we see in Warsaw and Prague, I would like for you to share how the governments in Warsaw and Prague reacted to Lithuania's decision to withdraw from the 17+1 format in 2021. How about we start with Wojciech again?
Well, after Lithuania decided to leave the format of 17+1, there was, of course, an intense debate about the countries that possibly could follow suit. Of course, I would say that for now, the other three countries are unlikely to withdraw from the formula, including, of course, Poland and Czechia. We should remember that just a few days after the decision taken by Lithuanian government, the Polish foreign minister had paid a visit to China, where, as the hot issue, he reassured Chinese side that the formula of 16+1 will remain a crucial pillar of the cooperation between Europe and China. And I guess that it's the same for Czechia. I believe that even the new government that has been planning to target Chinese investments, like to break into the whole networks created by Chinese counterparts in Czechia, and being more skeptical than Polish government about China, at the end will formally stay within the formula, and it's rather the issue of what the intentions of the Chinese side are right now to rejuvenate it. Thanks.
Thank you. And can we also interrogate this question from the Czech perspective?
Basically, I would agree what was already said, with adding that there was no big reaction on it, any official reaction from the Czech government on it. But of course, all the experts who also work for the state and administration, of course, everybody also in the security community, they took account of it, and the part of the political spectrum that is against this kind of cooperation with China now knows that there is always possibility to actually leave it, and everybody is, I would say, now watching very closely what will happen with Lithuania going forward, because they will show the strength and ability of China to really punish these countries who will potentially leave. But at the moment, in the official statements and from mouth of the prime minister and the government, there are no real plans to leave this platform. And I would sum the Czech approach of being cautious and actually observing the situation with Lithuania. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see that we have quite a few questions coming in from our audience as well. So before we move on to the next series of topics, I would like to pick up one question which I think is relevant to what we have discussed just now about this growing skepticism towards the 16+1 framework in Warsaw and Prague. So Javor from Taiwan is asking whether Poland and Czechia can influence other Central and Eastern European countries in the framework to adopt a similar and similarly skeptical view on China, since he mentions that Serbia, Bosnia, Montenegro seem to be very keen on continuing the deepening of cooperation with China, as well as some of the EU member states such as Greece, Hungary, and Bulgaria. So if no, isn't such division playing into China's favor?
Well, trying to answer the question, definitely at the current stage, the whole 16+1 format has been very fragmented. It is created out of various micro-regional initiatives and approaches toward what Chinese interest might bring or include into the particular economies of the states. Although, for the question of the role of Poland and Lithuania, I would say that overall, we should start with the short division, like the simple division between the EU member states that are part of the 16+1, and on the other hand, countries that are non-EU member states. And what it plays in favor for China. It's rather about posing the question if China wants to officially, formally create a good business offer for most of the countries from the format. And I would say that somehow each gain made by the Chinese side, whether in south of Europe, in Balkans region, or in the Central Eastern Europe, should be perceived as a huge advantage, as a huge success of the Chinese diplomacy, and for now, I would say that after the huge hopes that were aroused around the format 16+1 until 2015, let's say, are rather diminished, and there are other factors that are influencing the issue of how does the 16+1 format should look like in terms of the universal approach of the cooperation between the states. Hungary definitely has been a bad boy in the room, and Serbia, with not that much sphere of influence of other countries in the region, has been also considered as pretty favorable for Chinese investment, but on the other side, skeptical for the further integration into the European Union. And I will end up on just the idea of thinking about how would 16+1 format look like if most of the non-EU member states that are the part of the formula would be already in the European Union. That would create probably that would make a change, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. David, do you have anything to add on this audience question?
All right. I would just add that, especially for the Czech Republic, I don't expect that they could really affect number of the other countries in this platform to change their idea, or even to start to or try to retrieve to retreat from it. The thing is, so first, we are smaller than Poland. Poland actually is always the alpha omega of this region. Even when this region was actually entering the EU, it was always Poland that was the most important country. Of course, it's 4 times bigger than us. It has the coastline, etc. So it's, of course, more important, more open country, potentially more open country to global business. And bigger population, of course. But I want to say that, for example, I see from the Czech point of view that the events and causes that change the opinion on China cooperation in this country are very specific and are very, I would say, have roots in the specific Czech realities, right? For example, one of the main reasons why these opinion changed against China is then that the promising biggest investor in the Czech Republic, a company called CEFC, actually turned out to be complete fraud and did not bring any investments in a real sense, just some acquisitions. And it was actually even scandal of kind of tabloid sort, because even the Czech president, and that is very bizarre, but it's completely true, named one of the leaders of this Chinese company as his personal advisor, economic advisor. And then when this whole scandal broke out and this company was showed as a fraud company, basically this advisor disappeared, and today we know he's probably very likely in the Chinese prison, right? So just this scandal alone had a great impact on the view of China and how reliable partner it is in the Czech Republic, and among with other rather bizarre other scandals that we can talk about later, that impacted the view on the fact of what China can really bring us economically wise. So when I look on our situation and the situation of the other countries, and especially those who are not even in the EU, like Serbia, I would say the situation is so different that I do not believe that, especially in the case of those, again, who are not in the EU, that they would change or that behavior would be impacted by, for example, the Czech one. I think that change would have to, again, come out of their own interests and domestic policy, which is something else. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wojciech and David, for engaging with this question. I do believe that the heterogeneity among the countries participating in the 16+1 format has been discussed quite broadly as one of the criticisms of the format. So we can see that 10 years since its establishment, the issue persists. Moving forward, I would like us to ponder over the economic dimension of the 16+1 format, as since its very inception, the format was aimed at bolstering trade exchanges as well as investments between China and Central Eastern European countries. And yet, the framework has been called a zombie mechanism, as it allegedly failed to facilitate large-scale investments pledged by China. I know that you have alluded to this idea a little bit in your previous answers, but now can you elaborate a little bit more on the extent to which this evaluation is justified in the cases of Poland and Czechia? Wojciech?
Well, thanks. In a nutshell, like despite quite large investments made by mentioned by David, CEFC in Czechia, I would argue that so far Chinese counterparts are rather approaching the whole region with a mistaken and fatally not adjusted business offer. I would say that it has been rather designed for the third world countries, or in other words, like the South-South cooperation model, where the most of 16+1 countries, of course, are the members of the European Union. and they have a very good, like a very even comparing to the Chinese business offers superb access to funding being based on more favorable conditions. It's about interest rates, conditions of agreements, subcontractors, and many other aspects that were offered by Chinese side when entering the CE region. And overall, like these countries deserve to be treated with more, I would say, so-called civilized business offer, where both parties would be beneficial, and not only Chinese contractors, like it was used to be with Polish highways, like A1 or A2, where most of the projects or investments were constructed in a way of exploitation, like in Angola, like or in Africa, what China does, of the interest for the investments, and this huge amounts of money like that were expected to be flown into the region should be made by Chinese side rather to whet appetites, especially of the EU part of the 16+1 format, and to reconcile and start and finish new projects altogether. Because as David mentioned, in Czechia, general public opinion has been disappointed because of the empty promises. Yes, and that's what I would like to say. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And David, would you like to offer your insights on this?
Yes, thanks. So, as was said already repeatedly, there is the disappointment that the investments are not matching the promises. But I would say that in the case of Czech Republic, especially compared to Poland and the other countries, basically Czech Republic did not observe or did not see any investment into the critical infrastructure, right, to the energy framework, or to traffic, yeah, to logistics, to imported technologies, or the investments of real sense actually did not take place here, unlike in some other 17 plus 1, 16 plus 1 countries, where at least there were some really material, some of them did materialize, right? But in the Czech Republic, it's especially obvious that they did not. The only investments that actually did take place, or 90% of them, were acquisitions, right? The mentioned CEFC, CRRC, and others. There were some really publicly very loud or very known cases when, again, the CEFC, for example, bought the most popular Czech football club, yeah, the Slavia Prague, and again, but that was again acquisition. That was well publicized. People knew about it, but it was not in any way the kind of promised investments, right? So actually, that the change in 2012, when the traditional Czech foreign policy that focuses especially on human rights and their and supporting human rights globally because of our own experience with communism, and because of the ideas of Václav Havel, the first president, that was all changed in 2012 when the government back then decided that it's time for more investments from China, and basically stopped to emphasize these issues of human rights and democracy. And maybe a mistake that these people and even China did is that there were many numbers, like flowing in the air, talking about 10 billion Czech crowns, which is around 400 million dollars being invested in next 5 years. Then there were even such a huge projects being talked about, like that China will actually finish one Czech nuclear plant, and even very titanic projects like connecting the rivers of Danube and Vltava and making one great European river highway. And of course, nothing of that actually took place. That even these projects did not even start in theory. So because the expectations were so great, that it was bound to be disappointing in the end. I would even say that this is one of the few mistakes that otherwise very well and a very sophisticated campaign of Chinese influence does in Europe. So one of the biggest mistakes I think is that they actually named the platform 17 plus 1 or 16 plus 1 because they put the number into the name, which makes it super awkward now when one country actually leaves, or if even any other will leave, right? So I would say this like by it's notable that there was a mistake. They could just call it CEC Corporation or something like that, because now it will become awkward. But just like that, with the numbers, they made a mistake because they were using a lot of particular numbers when it comes to these investments, and it did not happen. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you to both of you for explaining some areas where that have might served as a breeding ground for this disappointment that both of you have spoken about at length when it comes to the magnitude and nature of economic engagement between China and Central Eastern European countries. Now, I am looking forward to hearing your insights about the Taiwan factor in relations between Warsaw and Prague and the 16 plus 1 format. And of course, these are questions that are quite interesting to me, given that I am tuning in from Taipei tonight. Since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, Central and Eastern European countries have largely embraced closer economic and people-to-people ties with Taiwan, which can partially be explained by the dissatisfaction with the level of economic engagement that we have just discussed, but also the ever-expanding normative divergence between Europe and China. So how can these new dynamics with Taiwan shape the future of the 16 plus 1 format? Wojciech, would you like to begin?
Yeah, thank you. Well, definitely, the issue has been very important for the future of the format of 16 plus 1 and the role of Taiwan and most of bilateral relationships between some 60 plus 1 states, countries with China. But to highlight, it's worth to mention Czechia, Estonia, Lithuania, Slovakia, Slovenia, that mainly decided to strengthen ties with Taiwan, mainly last year. And these countries are at the current stage adversaries of China in the region, I would say, like taking the hostile position. And what's more, from the other perspective, the sea response to the COVID, as you mentioned, um, pandemic crisis in Taiwan was rather received by Taiwanese side as a sign of friendship, like Czechia, Poland, and several other countries had sent thousands of doses of vaccine, and of course, closeting ties between the regional players and Taiwan clearly means that Beijing's influence in the Central Eastern Europe has been eroding, as well as Baltic states, so Lithuania. And that's, even the threats made by Chinese government about not engaging with the island nation, I mean Taiwan, has not been working at all. And the overall, I would say that this clearly undermines the whole formula. And what's interesting and highly broadcasted in the mainstream media is the fact that the C countries that are opposing the 16 plus 1 format, they are favoring the 27 plus 1, or, just escaping from quitting, they are raising the peculiar, like maybe not peculiar, but very far away, heightened perspective on the Taiwan playing the main role in the Three Seas Initiative, where Taiwan has been potentially perceived as an instrument that would be able to more efficiently, effectively challenge the Beijing's role in the region, and of course, to some part, it's in the Polish interest because the Three Seas Initiative was rather created or is led by Polish government, and hopefully the next one as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Wojciech. And can we hear from David about the view from Prague?
Yes. So the change towards Taiwan was part of the larger change toward China as a whole, as I was talking about it before. And interestingly enough, right now, Czech Republic became one of the most active countries when it comes to cooperating with Taiwan. Nominally, it's always in the Baltic countries, but Czech Republic is right behind it. And the change was really slow and inconspicuous at the start when there was the bigger distrust toward China, uh, and there were part of the entrepreneurship community. They were actually emphasizing the fact that in some sense Taiwan has much higher investments coming into the Czech Republic, and that actually Taiwanese entities employ more people than China. So even if we would like to behave completely pragmatically without any consideration of human rights or democratic rules, which we don't want to, but even if for the sake of discussions, if we would do that, it's still winning for Taiwan. So there was at the start of this change, and then later there were events the again the famous case of contract between the city of Prague and the city of Beijing, when Beijing the previous mayor of Prague basically allowed Beijing to put a article within the contract that was actually accepting the one China policy, which has in practice nothing to do with cooperation of two cities, right? So in reactions, then the new government in 2000, the new mayor of Prague in 2018 actually canceled this contract, tried to change it. The Chinese didn't want it, and they canceled it. And after this contract was cancelled with Beijing, Prague entered into contract with Taipei with very similar rules and very similar contract. So this kind of binary feeling about China and Taiwan as being a alternative towards our gate to Asia, or our possibility to enter the Asian market, was there since the start. And then the most watershedding change that is still echoing today is that the former head of one of the Czech parliamentary chamber of the Senate, he actually promised to visit Taiwan, and he was about to do so when the Chinese ambassador in the Czech Republic was really pushing and really threatening, basically in economic terms, the Czech side and this chairman of the Senate not to go. Sadly, this actually politician passed away during this very dramatic period. But the new his successor, the new chair of the Senate, then actually did go to Taiwan and did all what the former one was planning to do. So he visited he visited Taipei. He had his speech, very supportive of Taiwan, and because it's one of very high position, right? It's actually one of the most important positions according to the constitution. our constitution, the chairman of the Senate, China was, of course, very aware of that and was protesting against it. And this whole situation basically created waves in the Czech political scene when this politician who did visit China was member of the biggest opposition party, and this opposition party, of course, was supporting him. So then, when this opposition party became a governmental one, it brought with it also its agenda towards Taiwan. So because of very actually specific and in a way, I would even say a random start of progressing our or warming of our relations towards Taipei, we actually arrived at the situation now when big part of the political leadership actually openly says we should more do business with Taiwan, etc. They actually support it in everything short of actually saying anything against the one China policy, right? But except these nominal really statements, they do support it. The chairman of the Senate is still very supportive of it, and the new government seems to be very much of the same opinion. So this has changed a lot during the past 2 years. That would be all to this topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both of you for exploring the importance or the relevance of the Taiwan factor in the future trajectory of Warsaw's and Prague's engagement with the 16+1 format. I'm sure that we all really appreciate this multi-level look with not only the national level, but also the subnational perspective. And at this point, our audience members really deserve a big hand for being so active in the Q&A section. So we just have a few minutes left, but there is an interesting question pertaining to the economic security dimension of cooperation with China from Miguel, who is wondering how we could effectively prevent industrial and technical espionage during engaging with China economically. So, Wojciech, would you like to start?
Well, thanks for the question. Of course, the security issues are playing an important role in the terms of the expansion of Chinese business or Chinese economy in the whole continent, in the whole Europe. And of course, some threats posed like during the Huawei crisis, I would say like maybe escalation, that China will infiltrate or just use the cyber espionage for its own advantages. Although, like overall, I would say I'm not an expert in security studies, but for this, it is critical for the governments to preserve and maintain the ownership of all of the critical infrastructure exists in the countries, and not to allow, and it's a simple rule, not only regarding the China, that critical infrastructure should be owned by the state, like the government and the state within the country. And yeah, I will stop on it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. David, do you have anything to add?
It's definitely a very important thing that will be even more important now when we are basically facing almost continually things like supply chains problems, right? Things like capitalists. China are very openly using its economic tools for achieving their political objectives. So it's a very important topic. I would say I'm kind of optimistic because I can see things changing in Europe, right? Czech Republic, and I would like to emphasize even under the government already, 2 years has introduced own foreign direct investment screening law policy, which means investment for post-corrosive capital. At the same time, EU introduced as a whole its its own framework for investment policy, which is rather like example or benchmark for other countries. But even my country, even the Czech Republic, already has this kind of law. I can see that there is a big interest in learning from countries. This big interest in Europe when it comes to learning from countries that have much bigger experience with facing these malign economic influence actions, countries like Japan or Taiwan, which like this valuable knowledge and experiences with so and intertwined with China economically, and they already basically their framework, even though they are still progressing it. So I think we should learn from these countries, and we should implement the best practice from these countries. And I'm I have to say that this actually is changing in Europe. That realize that this will be more and more important, as we see now also because of the Ukraine and other reasons, that the economic security it will be maybe once almost more important than the military security. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much for weighing in on this question. Unfortunately, we are almost out of time, but I, for one, have thoroughly enjoyed our discussion tonight. I believe that your insights have really painted a picture of the issue of 16+1 cooperation as a very multifaceted one, and in order to fully understand the potential future trajectories of the cooperation between Poland and Czechia and China within this framework, we really have to take a holistic view that includes not only the economic dimension, but also normative and security considerations. And once again, thank you very much, not only to our speakers, but also to our audience members. It was great to see you take such an active interest in today's topic. And I apologize for not being able to take all of your questions, but this, I think that the volume of the discussions that we have witnessed only points to the relevance of the China factor also in our conversations about regional dynamics in Central and Eastern Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.